Okay, we'll maybe just start the session quite promptly then. So welcome along to the session today. It's lovely to see you all. I would ask if everybody wouldn't mind switching the mics off and their cameras as they come in. That would be lovely. And just to let you know that the session is being recorded today. Please feel free to use the chat button if you have any questions or feedback during the session at all. And we'll really try hard to keep an eye on that as the session goes along. So we'll be able to answer questions as we go, hopefully. I'd like to start by introducing Rachel Leyburn, who's the School Communities Manager at Scottish Book Trust, and Rachel's going to take us through the session today.
Thank you, Julie. So as Julie just said there, this is a session from Scottish Book Trust, and it's a session all about reading leadership and the role of learners in building a whole school reading culture. So you might have heard of Scottish Book Trust before. We're a national independent charity that works to improve the lives of everyone in Scotland through reading and writing. We believe everyone should have equal access to opportunities that the magic of books bring. Our school communities team work with learning professionals, schools and libraries to support children and young people to discover a love of reading. So today's session is focusing on reading leadership and the role of learners in building a whole school reading culture. So we know that there are lots of different elements that contribute to building and sustaining an effective reading culture across the school, but without the involvement of pupils, of course, and learners, it's unlikely to be meaningful and bring about the positive change that we see schools delivering. So today we're going to highlight some examples of successful reading leadership groups that we've seen across Scotland, how you can set them up and sustain engagement, from schools and pupils who have taken part in the First Minister's Reading Challenge and reading schools, but also how you can put learners at the heart of your reading schools accreditation as well. So to begin today's session, we just want to talk about why building reading culture is important. If you're coming along today, then you probably already think building a reading culture is important, but it's always really important to emphasise this. So encouraging reading for pleasure is, of course, an important way to drive improvement. There is strong evidence linking reading and educational outcomes, and we know that academic attainment is of vital importance, but the benefits of reading for pleasure go beyond this and stretch throughout a person's life. Research shows that pupils who read for pleasure are more likely to do better in school, even in subjects like maths or STEM, and are more empathetic to the world around them. Reading for pleasure is also a proven way of reducing stress and improving the health and well-being of pupils. Reading or hearing a book read aloud can help reduce pupils' and yours anxiety and stress levels. And especially over the last couple of years, we know that reading can be a great strategy for recovery and will support pupils' well-being after what's obviously been a stressful and anxious time for them. So it's also great for encouraging creativity throughout the curriculum, and it can be embedded in a variety of cross-curricular activities to suit every setting. And of course, all of this is very important, and it can justify spending time and money on reading. But just as important, or maybe more so, we would say, is the way that reading can make young people feel. So the benefits of reading for pleasure can stretch throughout a child's life and support their lifelong learning, providing better outcomes for them in a variety of ways. Of course, reading for pleasure is fun and it's exciting. It sparks learners' curiosity, and it gives them stronger motivation to learn and higher engagement in school. It also offers a form of escapism and relaxation, encouraging them to set aside time for their well-being. And we know this is obviously especially important at the moment as we recover from the school closures and the impact the last couple of years have had on children and young people. And as learning professionals, you can help introduce young people to all of this, and creating a reading culture is a really great way to make that happen as well. And here's just a quote from the Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development, which highlights that reading for enjoyment has been reported as more important for children's educational success than their family's socioeconomic status. So it just shows you the opportunities and the influence that reading for pleasure can have on that lifelong learning that we know is so important for young people. So one of the Scottish Book Trust programmes that we want to highlight to you today is, and one that is really great for supporting reading leadership in pupils, is the First Minister's Reading Challenge. So you might have heard about the First Minister's Reading Challenge. It's obviously been going on for several years now, and it's been designed to help learning professionals develop a love of reading in children and young people through fun activities, challenges and national awards at the end of the school year. And it's an opportunity to structure the work that you're doing, to promote reading and books in your class, and celebrate your achievements at the end of the school year too. This year it's been refocused slightly, so there's been a wee bit of a change over the summer, and it's been redesigned to support and celebrate individual reading journeys. so for those individual reading journeys of classes and pupils. And you can gain national recognition for the work that you're doing in your class, in your library, or the work of a particular pupil as well. And it's a really great place to start your reading journey with your class. You know, if you're just starting out in your reading journey, or maybe want to refocus the work that you're doing within your classroom, it's really great for that, as it's entirely flexible and adaptable to what you want to focus on, whether that's getting pupils to read more books, have more choice, or take on new reading habits as well. And there's lots of resources to support you and find inspiration, from reading resolutions to start your school year off, to festive reading activities in the run up to Christmas. And there's also funding opportunities as well that you can apply to get an author to come to your school and deliver an event, as well as get books for your school and supporting materials too. Reading Schools is another programme that we wanted to highlight to you today. So this is our new accreditation programme, which has been in development for the last few years. So it's been in the pilot stages and it's just launched nationally this term. So every school can now take part. And what it does kind of differently to the First Semester's Reading Challenge is that it focuses on building and sustaining a reading culture across the whole school. So instead of those kind of individual classes or individual pupils, it's all about that whole school reading culture. And it's modelled on how good is our school for. So one of the main aspects of Reading Schools is the framework, which is modelled on Higgius 4 as well. And that's designed to support schools at every stage of their Reading Schools accreditation. So it does things like helping you to self-evaluate, see what you're doing already and identify areas for development, helps you to plan activities for the year ahead, and demonstrate the value of reading for pleasure against Higgius 4 as part of your school improvement plans. So as part of Reading Schools within this framework, there are 3 levels of accreditation that you can go for. Broadly speaking, the core Reading Schools level encompasses that kind of foundational work that we'd want schools to be doing to develop reading culture. So that's around like reading routines, establishing the school environment, so from providing learners with access to a wide variety of children's books that are current and relevant to them, to making sure that you've kind of set aside that regular time to read for pleasure, and that's built into the school day. So those kind of foundational core things that you'd expect to build a reading culture from. And so if the core work acts as that kind of foundation in the school that you can build upon, a silver accreditation is about bringing in and providing extra opportunities for learners. So that's things like engaging with authors or bringing in links with the local library, things like that. So at silver level, we'd kind of expect schools to be doing things like having reading sessions outdoors, having reading spaces in the playground, incorporating reading into breakfast clubs and after school clubs, and also into incorporating reading into wider school events like Christmas celebrations and things, so out with the kind of set reading days in the calendar. So silver is about bringing opportunities into the school. Gold is that kind of final level where it's about taking the enthusiasm and experience around reading that you've been building up over this time out into the community and sharing what you've learned. So at gold level, we would expect schools to maybe try things like creating displays in community spaces, introducing a book fairies project, introducing a community book trail, putting posters in shop windows or painted displays, maybe creating a community reading area, things like that. So that's kind of the next level. And it's all about kind of involving the community. So I thought what might be helpful now is just watch a very quick Reading Schools animation, which kind of encompasses everything really nicely and succinctly, which has just been released in the last couple of weeks. So I'll just play it for you now, and that'll give you a wee overview. Yeah, that's a kind of whistle-stop tour to Reading Schools. But hopefully the video kind of gives you, it kind of encompasses encompasses it for you. But here is basically a one-stop shop of everything that reading schools offer as part of your work to build that reading culture. So, you know, every school that takes part will be working towards an accreditation and something that's really worthwhile working towards. It provides a coherent structure for all your reading initiatives as well. So whatever you're doing around reading, you'll be able to fit it in with the framework and fit it in with your action plan. It's a school improvement framework, which mentioned map to Higgius 4. So anything that you're doing around school improvement already, it'll be able to be aligned to that. There's also lots of opportunities for professional development and ideas to develop learning boards, which we're just actually going to be touching on now and going into a bit more detail on. There's also the opportunities for collaboration within and across schools too, and with partners or library services. Helps to engage families and the wider community, and also all the way through, Scottish Book Trust provide you with training and support throughout your journey. So this is what reading schools can offer you, and hopefully if you're not taking part already, that gives you a bit of an idea of what to expect with it. So as I just mentioned there, using these programs as a structure for your reading activity wherever you are on your reading journey, ultimately, how do you involve learners in a school's reading culture? Obviously, we know that it's not going to be a reading culture across the whole school if the learners aren't involved. But one of the best ways of doing this is setting up a reading leadership group. So that's what we're going to go through in the next part of today's session. So first of all, what is reading leadership? It's quite a big term. It's a little bit like reading culture or reading environment. It's like what does that actually mean? So we define at Scottish Book Trust a reading leadership as an established group within the school. So that can comprise of pupils, a school librarian, teachers, senior management, school staff, and potentially also parents and families as well. And we'd expect them to lead on the reading activity throughout the school year and be that point of contact and inspiration for developing the reading culture across the school. They'd also be recognised as reading role models across the school by staff, pupils and families, and meet regularly to discuss progress and ideas. And this is one of the things that you do at the very start of your reading schools journey. So when you're kind of meeting to establish your action plan and input ideas, decide what your priorities are around reading for the upcoming school year, it would be your reading leadership group that would kind of take that on. So it's obviously really important to involve pupils from the outset. So as you can imagine, reading leadership groups provide a great opportunity for putting learners at the centre of your school's reading culture. It's probably one of the most effective ways of doing it. And we've seen lots of examples through the Reading Schools programme, but also through the First Minister's Reading Challenge that touch on some of the ways that you can get pupils involved and sustain their engagement. I think that's the main thing here, is that, well, you can get them involved, but then it's how do you actually sustain that? How do you keep that going year after year? So we've got a few examples that we're just going to touch on here, but these are some of the projects on the slide. One of which is Mosshead Primary's Reading Leadership Group. They worked on their World Book Day celebrations. This is quite a good example because it shows the broad representation of a reading leadership group. So they had pupil representatives from P2 all the way up to P7, along with teachers and their senior leadership team. And for World Book Day, obviously, you know, centering the school calendar events around reading, for World Book Day, they organised and judged a brilliant bookmarks competition, which just sounds brilliant, together with hosting a book tasting session as well. So the Reading Leadership Group just seemed to be real drivers of activity, with World Book Day and Book Week Scotland being the kind of pinnacles of their reading activities. For Book Week Scotland, they also had the parents record themselves reading and share that with the school because of COVID restrictions. So again, it was all just about how to cultivate that love of reading on those kind of key days in the reading calendar. And all in all, these events were really well received and generated great engagement with the Reading Leadership Group at the helm. Another example is from Whiston Primary. Their pupils organised a reading committee, and they decided to take the decision to make their library more accessible by using authors to organise their class and school library. So instead of having their book stock arranged in the kind of current way they were, they thought they would arrange it by author instead, because that way it was more accessible for the pupils. And this was in recognition of learners' attitudes to reading, with the committee responding by making book selection easier. And this was obviously identified by the learners. They kind of worked with the other learners to identify what would be the best way for them to access the books. And they also designed themed book displays for their books in the library, which is regularly rotated as well, exposing learners to different genres, hot topics, and books they might not have discovered otherwise. And as a consequence, the reading is really booming. The libraries are very well used and visited, with a very visible increase in the readership across the school. So again, that just shows you the kind of impact having the pupils involved and working with their peers to figure out what's the best way to change the readers' attitudes to books. Rashi Lee Primary's Reading Leadership Group set up and run a lunchtime reading club for younger pupils. This is a really nice example. So they met with a distinct question in mind. It's quite a long question, bear with me. So it says, how can we encourage children across the school with similar reading interests to get together and share their opinions and recommendations and enjoyment of similar authors and genres? So yeah, they didn't want to just focus on one thing, they wanted to focus on several things as part of that. But again, it meant that the pupils were involved, and it meant that they were able to really focus in on what they wanted to do as part of this lunchtime reading club. So as a result of much discussion, they developed their lunchtime reading club to be a social space for children to meet and talk about their favourite books, authors and genres. And to shake things up, they decided to rotate the location of the clubs as well. So it meant that those pupils who maybe wouldn't necessarily go to a library or wouldn't come during class time, they would actually be able to come at a time that suit them or to a space that suit them. So the group presented a poster plan to each class, displaying the dates and the locations of each base, along with easy to access recommendation slips, which they encourage learners to complete and take to each club session as part of it. And the clubs have been a really great success and are really well attended. And in order to kind of make sure that those lower primary classes are able to come along and contribute in the same way, they meet with a P7 who helps them to chair and facilitate and regulate their club, whereas the P4 to 7s meet on alternate days as well. So it just helps to make sure that there's involvement from across the ages and stages. So yeah, it just meant all the learners could talk excitedly about books and freely share their thoughts and recommendations too. And finally, the last example I want to highlight to you is a secondary one, Airdrie Academy, who their reading leaders designed a mascot and set up a social media account to promote reading throughout the school. This is especially a good one for secondary schools to utilise. So their reading leadership group created a social media handle, which was just Airdrie Reads, and they were entirely responsible for it. They promoted reading across the school and wider community, showcasing their school as a proud champion of reading for pleasure. And to accompany their social media presence, they decided to create a reading identity as part of that and designed a mascot, which again, I think is just really creative and really fun. And then they got the whole school on board by inviting them to name the mascot. Again, it's a really, really great idea that's come from the reading leadership group, but they've involved the whole school in the next stage. And they settled on Page Turner, which I think is very apt. Well, couldn't think of a better name. And the school really jumped on board with it. Page Turner has become very well recognised and offers a great focus for reading activities and the promotion of positive reading experiences throughout the school as well. So again, that just shows you the different ways that people can get involved. And throughout the process, staff and pupils have been sharing their insights into the role of learners and how they contribute to the work of their reading cultures, from having reading ownership over their reading activities to developing lifelong skills and even to an impact on their experiences of school and their own well-being. There is so much potential for reading leadership groups. So these are just a few quotes that we've received as part of evaluations as we've been going through, but it just shows you the kind of scope that there is and the different opportunities that there are from developing reading leadership groups. So now we want to go into a little bit more detail. As I say, giving you a few ideas there, but we want to go in a bit more detail and obviously let you hear from some pupils themselves about what it's been like for them being involved in reading leadership groups. So we want to highlight some examples from particular schools that we think will be particularly useful for you. And the first is from Deer Park Primary, whose Primary 1 class won last year's First Minister's Reading Challenge Pupil Reading Journey Award. So this is the Primary 1s that did this. And their school was also accredited as a core reading school last year as well. So as part of their submission to the First Minister's Reading Challenge, the reading ambassadors were appointed from P1 all the way up to P7, so every age and stage had reading ambassadors, and their teachers decided to focus on interdisciplinary learning for each class, which was related to their class novel or book, whichever they were doing as a class. So the P1s in particular focused on I'm Not Very Afraid of the Dark, which is a lovely picture book. And they did a whole host of cross-curricular activities that were all pupil-led and inspired by what the children took from the book as well. So they created their own front covers, they discussed what they were afraid of, how to change fears into something positive, creating art showcasing differences between light and dark, exploring their senses, doing some drama and role play, creative writing as well. And then they ended up sending in a video of all of the pupils signing in Makaton what they were afraid of and what they weren't afraid of as well, and how they can change their fears into something positive. So it's just really, really lovely. And it just shows you that the kind of submission through the reading challenge was entirely people-led, kind of showcasing their work like on the slide here. It was, all photos and quotes and things of the work that the pupils have been doing. And it gives them a lot of ownership of the text that had been selected for their class to take part in. And this is another secondary example. So we've got Holy Cross High School in North Lanarkshire. So they are a silver accredited reading school. And what they decided to do was establish a termly podcast. So, we've just chatted a little bit about social media accounts, podcasts, another really, really great way of involving secondary pupils in reading for pleasure. And this was established by their S6 reading leaders, and they decided to call it the Reading Cafe, which again, I just think is lovely. Who wouldn't want to join a podcast called the Reading Cafe? And the reading leadership group scripted and presented the podcast with junior pupils contributing short reviews and participating in kind of book club style discussions, looking at genre and theme. And the first podcast involved S1 classes participating, and they did lots of different types of activities. The kind of things they did were worst villain and why, which was pupils suggesting characters from books who they think were effective villains, as well as exploring the reasons for believing that. Mirror Mirror was another one where the groups discussed characters from books who they can see themselves in, so kind of sharing those lived experiences that reflect their similarities. Words and Pictures was another one, with pupils sharing ideas about books that they think would make great movies. I think especially with the kind of Netflix effect and vice versa, that's just a particularly good activity. And they were encouraged to identify some potential actors for the cast, a slogan for the poster, and if they can, a theme song or artist for the soundtrack, which again I think is a really good one to think about in the context of books and films. So the podcast was organised with 4 classes from S1, and what the reading leadership group did was took responsibility for running each activity for their assigned group, so their assigned group of S1s, keeping that conversation going, encouraging participation, and it meant that the groups can take part in activities on rotation as well before they entered the recording room. So obviously none of the pupils were put on the spot, they kind of prepared in advance and gave them a chance to come up with ideas ahead of the recorded discussion. But as you can see from the slides, one of the first ones they did this term was interviewing author Robin Stevens about her books, and it's all pupils in the photo. There's no staff. It's all the kids that are taking part and really taking ownership of it. So it just shows you the amount of kind of creativity that can come, and off back of that, follow-on discussions that can happen as well. So I've now got another wee video for you. So this is from Rosebank Primary in Dundee, and they used the First Minister's Reading Challenge and reading schools to revitalise their reading culture after their school was closed during the national lockdowns. And they really focused on their reading spaces, the spaces throughout the school that were kind of focused on reading. And they actually ended up being highly commended in the Reading Challenge last year, and they also achieved their silver accreditation for reading schools, so you can really see the impact that's been had over the last year in their setting. And the pupils play a really key role in redesigning the reading spaces across the school, ensuring that these spaces were appealing and welcoming to everyone. So I will just play the video for you now. So this is actually the video that the school submitted to the Reading Challenge and Reading Schools last year. And as you can see, it's been completely done by the Reading Leadership Group. The two girls that are involved in their kind of reading committee really, lead on it and take you all the way through it. And even, talking about their reading journey as a whole as a school, like it's just so impressive to see. But also the involvement from all of the pupils in designing the reading spaces and deciding like the theme as well, the fact that they decided, oh, we'll go for a kind of magical forest theme throughout the school, and that was obviously decided by all the pupils. So it just shows you what can be done by doing that. And the final example I just wanted to highlight to you is from Cowie Primary, who were winners of the First Ministry's Reading Challenge way back in 2019. So this is a video that kind of shows you their journey from winning the whole school award for the Reading Challenge back in 2019 to now, where they are now a gold level accredited reading school. So that was kind of then building on the foundations of the reading culture. Now, a few years later, they're a kind of gold level reading school. And Cowie Primary's reading culture was very much guided by the pupils at all stages. So it kind of started out as an initial survey to identify areas for development, which you'll see one of the teachers chat about. And that kind of led to learner-led paired reading program. So I will play the video for you just now. That just shows you again like that kind of reading journey, but also the pupil the pupils' involvement throughout that as well, and you can see the impact on the pupils afterwards as well, even just how much fun they've had being reading leaders as well, which I think again is such an important aspect. It's like if they're enjoying it, then that's great, and they're more likely to keep doing it. And then it also means year on year you've got that engagement that you can sustain. So more kind of throughout, obviously, with these programs, we have evaluations and surveys throughout them to kind of gauge how they're doing. But one of the things we wanted to highlight today is that most survey responses that we've had as part of our most recent evaluation report has highlighted that these programs can really create opportunities for amplifying pupil voice as well. So obviously, you know, there's so many different areas that you're trying to focus on, but in terms of pupil voice and introducing these leadership roles into the school, these programs can be really effective. 98% of respondents felt that the program helped pupils have their voices heard, and 93% said it encourages learners to take on leadership roles. So if you are wondering about how to get those pupils involved, then taking part in these programs can be a really effective way of making that happen. And most survey respondents felt that there had been an increase in reading for pleasure across all of the target groups as well. We know that obviously, especially in terms of addressing the attainment gap, we want to make sure that all pupils feel involved in this, not just keen readers. We want every child to feel involved and be able to have their voices heard too. So it's been really interesting to see that the activities have been particularly impactful on boys, for pupils with additional support needs, and for pupils from socio-economically disadvantaged backgrounds as well. One of the examples from the most recent reports highlighted that one school told us about a P5 pupil who had ADHD, and she'd really refused to read during their morning soft start. So they'd kind of established their routine reading time as a soft start to the day, which obviously works for lots of different schools, but for this particular pupil, it wasn't quite resonating very well. And instead, she would often kind of pick out arguments with other learners. She wasn't really having maybe the most positive behaviour during this time. So the school kind of thought, okay, well, how do we help this pupil really actually engage in this in a meaningful way, in a positive way for her? So they did a reading volunteer project where she began to read to younger pupils in the morning instead. So instead of kind of having her allocated dear time after a soft start, she actually got to be involved in a kind of paired reading project, effectively working with younger pupils in the morning instead. And she really enjoyed talking to the younger pupils about their book choices and organising them so they were ready to listen to the story as well. And this all gave her a lot of purpose during that morning soft start. Instead of, kind of just being told to sit and read, she was actually given a lot more autonomy and a sense of responsibility, which was really important for her. And her class teacher had noted that she's more willing to read in class now as a result of this, is much calmer and is really ready to begin her learning each day. So it shows you the importance of that kind of pupil leadership through reading leadership groups that can kind of come from that. And it shows that reading leadership groups can be adapted as well to whatever your setting requires, or it can be based on what your pupils' needs and interests are as well. No one size fits all. Of course, obviously, we touched on quite a lot of different examples today. So think about what pupils may benefit the most from a reading leadership group and how they might be able to contribute in different ways as well. So thank you very much. I hope that's given you some inspiration to take away to get started with your own reading leadership groups, or if you've already got them established, some ideas for taking them forward and sustaining the engagement with them. I'd be very happy to take any questions if there's any in the chat. I noticed that someone maybe was having a wee bit of an issue with the videos, but as we said, all of the videos are on the Scottish Book Trust YouTube channel if you'd like to watch any back, and hopefully with the recording of the session coming out afterwards, you'll be able to watch them back there. So if you were having any technical issues, but yeah, if anyone has any questions, I'd be more than happy to take them just now, and I hope you enjoyed the session this afternoon. Hi, Ms. Irvin. Thank you for your question. Do you have to submit evidence by a set date to achieve accreditation, or can it take longer than a year? Yeah, you can. There's no set deadline for submitting your evidence. Obviously, if you want to be accredited within the school year, we'd ask that you submit obviously your evidence within that school year so that you hear back for that school year. So yeah, if you wanted to get the accreditation within the school year that you're working towards it, then we'd ask you to submit before the summer term. But if there's no deadline, so you can submit at any point in the year, or if you're wanting to focus on your work over the course of a year and then submit after in the following term, that's absolutely fine. I should have said that your accreditation lasts for 3 years as well. So once you've achieved whichever level of accreditation you're going for, it's valid for 3 years. So you've got it during that time. But also it means that if you're working to a particular level and you decide you want to go for a higher level, if you're working to core and you want to go for silver, within that time, that's absolutely fine as well. It depends on what works best for you.
Thanks, Rachel. I'm just hoping people have plenty of time there to ask a question if they wanted to. But I think if there isn't any other questions, just want to say a big thank you very much for today's session, and I hope that people got a lot of inspiration actually watching so many examples there today, and we look forward to making the video available for everyone after the session. So thank you very much indeed, everyone.